welcome back. So we are moving on with the presentations of this afternoon. Our next speaker is Sophie Achermann. She is Executive Director at Allianz F, which is the Federation of Swiss Women's Associations. She has a vast experience in policy making in Switzerland and also in advocacy, and she will talk a little bit about a project that she has been involved, Stop Hate Speech. Sophie, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you a lot. So you've already heard, my name is Sophie Achermann. I'm the director of Allianz F, and I'm the co-founder of the project Stop Hate Speech. Stop Hate Speech is a project of Allianz F, and we are the biggest non-party political umbrella organization of women's organization in Switzerland. Under our umbrella, we have over 100 organizations and several hundred individuals, and we are 120 years old, and we bring the concerns of our members' organization to Parliament and ensure that women's issues have a strong lobby and are heard in Parliament. And I'm very happy to be here today and to tell you something about our project. But before I do that, I would like to explore or highlight a few issues of hate speech a little bit further. So hate speech on the internet has become a global problem. The barrier to hostilities and insult has fallen dramatically, and never before has it been possible to see so clearly how hatred on the internet can pose a threat to democracy as it was a few weeks ago. After weeks of inflammatory attacks on the internet, the hatred spread from social media to the offline world, and an attack on the oldest democracy was witnessed in real time. However, this monstrous obstacle does not stand alone. For years, we have seen now how hatred on the net has repeatedly translated into the offline violence. In 2015, during a big wave of refugees in Europe, social media was filled with hate against refugees. And in Germany, countless refugees' homes were set on fire. Even misogyny from the keyboard has turned into attacks from the internet. Many statements are still without penalty, and many statements remain uncommented. Civil courage is often searched for in vain on the net. And our project does not want to let comments like these simply stand. We want to react to them. And that's maybe also an explanation why Allianz F, as a women's organization, is trying to acting against hate speech. For us, it's important that women are represented in politics, in science, in the economy, in the general public, as well as in the virtual sphere. And research has shown that women are sexualized and vulgarly assaulted way more often than men. They receive rape threats and are confronted with stereotypes. And this led to women reacting differently to hate speech. They withdraw from the online discussion and social media more often than men. And as a result, social medias are no longer open to a large part of the population. Women who are already underrepresented in the public sphere will withdraw even more. And this is dangerous, because a democracy can only exist if all citizens are given the opportunity to participate in a discourse. And that's why the largest umbrella organization in Switzerland, Allianz F, had set its goal of addressing this issue, with the aim that all people can participate on the internet without fear of violence. Allianz F has launched a project, Stop Hate Speech. So we see it as a necessity to take action against this. And we do this with the help of a little friend, which I would like to introduce to you now.
BotDog is a digital algorithm trained to find hate speech on the internet. BotDog brings back suspicious material. We decide if it's hate or not by swiping right or left. BotDog gets smarter with each evaluation. The the only way to stop hate speech is to interfere with counter-speech. Are you aware that violence causes more violence? Haters usually stop when feeling supervised. It works.
I hope you were able to as well hear the sounds. If not, that wasn't that funny. But that was BotDog. Our project has programmed an algorithm named BotDog. A little dog searches in the internet for hate. As soon as it finds it, it brings it back to a community of volunteers. These in return can reject the hate with counter speech. So far, there is no universally accepted definition of hate speech. And if you ask 3 people what they would classify as hate speech, they have usually more than 4 opinions. Hate is a very subjective feeling and more of a spectrum than exact science. It's always a challenge to build an algorithm on subjective assumptions. And to get around this problem, the project has engaged civil society. We launched a web app, a rating web app. It's like a Tinder for hate speech, where I can swipe left or right whether I think a comment is hate speech or not. And over the past month, around 1,200 volunteers have trained BotDog from scratch. By assessing whether a comment contains hate or not, BotDog has learned to detect hate speech on the internet. The community has done more than 52,000 evaluations, and each comment was rated at least 3 times. And the community was also weighted according to diversity criteria. Group of people who were found less frequency in the community were given more weight in their evolution. This was done with the aim of obtaining a possible cross-section of the population and their feeling towards hate speech. The aim was to actively prevent the bias in the programming of BotDog. But BotDog is not just finding hateful comments, but comments they can get hateful within context. As an example, in the comment section of a French magazine, it said, "I hope where they're going, there are good showers waiting for them." This comment standing alone seems to be quite okay, but it was an article about the Jewish family emigrating. With this example, you can see how important the context is, and BotDog is trying to find that as well. He has now found a rate of around 85%, but he will get better over time with the help of the community. As soon BotDog finds hate speech, the second phase begins. The community does counter speech. Real people stay up to counter speech. They reject comments actively and participate in the discussion. The community doesn't only do this work with the help of BotDog, it also gets support of a platform where not only counter speech happens, but they can find help, like victim counseling centers, intervention strategies, and a lot of exchange. The whole project should actually be an impulse project. The spark should jump on the broad civil society. We want to encourage civil society to become active by itself. Because it should become really normal to react to hate speech and to reject it instead of being unsettled. We have talked a lot about anonymity and its influence on hate speech in the recent years. Studies have shown that today many people spread hate using their real names and that anonymity doesn't have a great influence on hate speech on the internet. And I will counter that. I think anonymity of the hate writers has a big influence on the other people. As long as I don't know the person who is spreading hate, I don't feel responsible to react on it. On the train, in the restaurants, in the tram, wherever I go, I would always stand up and speak out against racism, for instance. But on the internet, I don't, because I don't have a face towards me. And it's precisely this anonymity that prevents me from getting involved. And we want to promote civil courage on the internet, that we also step up against racism on the internet. The project is about removing hurdles that we all get the feeling that we are responsible when bad things happen on the internet, just like in the offline world. When we talk about counter speech, I get often asked, isn't it harmful to give the troll more attention? The old don't feed the troll. I think we have to make a difference here. In counter speech, the intervention is never the intention is never to change my opponent's mind. I don't do counter speech to lecture Brad72 on Twitter. I do it to change the mind of the 95% people who just consume on the internet but won't ever generate any account themselves. Because language creates reality, and the constant repetition of facts or fake news influences the readers. And with that in mind, it's imperative that we all have to engage decently in the discourse and thus contribute as well to the diversity of opinion. Our project tries not only to combine civil society and technical approach, but also science. Together with the ETH Zurich and the University of Zurich, we have established a counter-speech lab. With the help of our community, various counter-speech strategies are being researched for their effectiveness and impact, so that the phenomenon of hate speech can be combated as specifically as possible. The ultimate goal of the project would be, besides hoping to make the internet a more decent place, would be to be able to develop a software that not only recognize hate, but also interact with commenters and to give them feedback on their comments right away. With this, we could actually also work on the media skills of the civil society and even have a greater impact. And finally, before I get to the questions, I want to highlight something. We always get the same accusation. It's the accusation of censorship. We get a lot of very, very bad emails and phone calls. They say we try to censorship the internet. What about freedom of speech? And I would always say your freedom of speech ends there where it harms the dignity of other people. That's also written in the Constitution of Switzerland. Human dignity must be respected and protected. In our project, we try to encourage people to actively engage in discourse. In this way, we will contribute to diversity of opinion, and we don't go against freedom of speech. We try to embrace the freedom of speech of the decent people. We will really rely on civil courage instead of censorship. So that said, I'm actually already at the end of my presentation and very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for the presentation. This is a wonderful project because I think that it goes beyond the fact of signaling that there's a problem, but it actually intervenes to try to address it. And I hope that we see more of these kind of initiatives in the future. So I hope that it gives us a lot of inspiration for people who might be watching this. So my first question would be related to the actual comments that you are identifying. Would it be possible for you also to identify which are actually the targets of hate speech and how this evolves over time? You mentioned some. You mentioned that, for instance, women, but also immigrants or asylum seekers might be the targets of some of these comments. Do you see evolutions over time in reaction to specific events? Are you able to actually exploit this kind of information as well?
Yes, so we ask in our Tinder for hate speech, we don't just ask if something is hate speech for someone, but also if it's against whom, and in the end, what kind of words are linked to the hate speech. That's one thing. So over time, we're not there yet. We should also label the people who are more affected of hate speech. And over time, we should also see an evolution. What we did beginning of COVID in Switzerland, beginning of the first lockdown, we made a study with the comments we had, and we saw quite clearly that after a big wave of we all can do this together, we're one big family in Switzerland, there was a big wave of hate coming. And it's more of a feeling because we didn't have reliable data before, but hate speech went even worse since COVID. But in the future, we will have data. And I think that's an important point of the project as well, is really to find for Switzerland data which counts, because until now, we don't really have reliable data in Switzerland on how much hate speech we have and it's against whom usually.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any kind of idea of how the different groups that might be target particularly target of hate speech are represented in your community of coders or people who are collaborating? Do you have any kind of insights on that?
Yeah, that was interesting. We thought as a women's organization, we might have way more women in our community than men, and that wasn't the case actually. So we still have a quite nice gender balance. We had strong diversity criteria. So we really wanted to have people from who's older, younger, left, right-winged, politically wise. But where we failed on having enough people are people with not the highest education. But on the other criteria, we have to say we have people from the LGBTI community. We have people with migration backgrounds. We did manage a lot in our diversity criteria, but not the one with them. The education status.
I have one question here from Pasquale. Thank you for the talk. Very inspiring. What is the evidence that your approach works? How do you actually measure the effectiveness of your project?
So, I mean, I could say when the world's a better place, but no, that's the good part about BotDoc. So we are able to see whether what we do now with that counter speech lab is that we tell the community to answer in a specific way, in a specific strategy, to say, try it with humor or try it with facts or try it with empathy, for instance. And after time, they will be able to see with the help of BotDoc if a discussion gets better or if it gets more hate. And I might also think that that's changes also from platform I am on. I could think of that on Twitter, you need other strategies than on Facebook. And we're now really at the beginning of that counter speech lab, but with the help of BotDoc as well there, we will hopefully be able to have interesting data in a few months.
Mm-hmm. And one last question from Emilien. Do you have some examples of what counter hate speech could look like concretely? So.
Yeah, actually on our platform, we will do a best of counter speech over time, where you can find maybe some inspiration. What I actually like is, first of all, you don't always need to counter the person who spreads hate. So you don't need to talk with Brad22. You just can have a positive comment on what's written in the article. So you don't have to get in a discourse with the person. But if you want to, you can say like very easy things like, can we maybe discuss this topic without anger or without hatred? So you don't always have to have a discussion about what's written in the article, but just go in very decent forms as you would maybe do in the offline world if someone's saying something very stupid.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for this presentation and for the Q&A. There are still questions coming, so I'm pretty sure that you might find people looking forward to interact with you in the virtual rooms as well. So thank you for your participation, and we will move to our next speaker in just a few minutes. So stay tuned.